The White House and Republican lawmakers are trying to advance additional funds to small businesses hurt by the coronavirus. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin had this to say. Under the direction of the president, he's spoken to congressional leaders to secure an additional $250 billion for the Paycheck Protection Plan program.
Well, the request comes just 2 weeks after the Senate passed a historic $2 trillion stimulus package, of which $349 billion is allocated to the program. Here to talk about whether or not the additional request is enough to keep small business alive, we bring in Indiana Republican Senator Mike Braun. Senator, thanks for being here.
Hey, good to be on.
Hey, thanks, Senator, for joining us. We've heard a lot in the media about what's going on in major metropolitan areas, Washington, D.C., New York, Louisiana, New Orleans area, Detroit, et cetera. Tell me what the status is of a place like Indiana that's a little bit more rural. And secondly, are you getting the help you need for the small businesses and the agricultural community in Indiana?
So it got out of the gates a little slow. The guidance, I think, was a little unclear, but over the last 3 days, my team has been in communication with the Indiana Bankers Association, which would be the community bankers that I think are going to really be doing a lot of these loans. There were process issues today, yesterday late. A lot of that had been addressed. So it is very broad and it is very deep. I just had a text with Senator Lee from Utah. We're on the steering committee in the Senate, which would be some of the more fiscally conservative individuals. And I told him, if it's purely more for the PPP, I'm in. If it's got any of that other stuff in there, it's going to make it difficult because the carnage among small business is that significant. Luckily, in a place like Indiana, we are kind of a rural state with a big metro area right in the center. And our governor, I think, has done a good job of really tamping the disease down, doing the things you need to do. Made a smart move a couple days ago for the non-essential businesses, let them start doing curbside and takeout, which is a bunch of the businesses that have been shuttered. So that's the kind of entrepreneurial approach I'd like to see to, reopen the economy. Indiana, I heard 3 states had not declared, Wyoming, Idaho, and Alaska.
Yep.
That is so different. Indiana is so different from what we've been fixated on, New York and New Jersey. And I hope we do a smart, selective approach and starting to get things back, geared up.
Okay.
Senator, Indiana, one of the nation's largest farmlands. Can you talk to me about what is specifically being done for these farmers? I know there's concern now with supply chains, and if this continues by summer, that some of those could be potentially jeopardized.
Ag has been in a pickle for about 3 or 4 years. Inputs have been historically high. Prices for their crops historically low. Just hung up with a friend and a dairy farmer who's got a fairly large dairy farm not too far from here. And they are having to dump milk because demand's down. So across the farm economy, this has gone from bad to really bad. And farmers generally are out there on their own. Of course, the tariff impact, there were the market facilitation payments. And I don't think there was really that much in there for them, which everyone is now turning to the federal government because the policies that were put in place that created this economic shutdown, farmers were struggling with not this severity, but a bad economy before this started.
It's interesting that you brought up the dairy farmer. I heard the same anecdote from somebody in Wisconsin, and I don't think people completely get this, which is they don't have a place. You still have to milk the cows, right? The cows have to be milked. So you're getting all this milk, but there's nowhere to bring it to market. Is that pretty much what you're seeing as well?
Exactly, and it's perishable, and milk goes off of the farm the day of or the day after the milking is done. So it's a process that's not used to having the supply chain all clogged up. We had the discussion as well that there's chronic oversupply in that market. And they as an industry are getting together to either collectively, voluntarily bring down production or thinking maybe government should put some type of set aside plan in place. It used to be the way you'd idle acreage. Everyone is now finding all the problems within their industry within their own way of doing business within it, accentuated, because the coronavirus has put this kind of stress broadly on the economy.
So let me ask you this. Your family background is with a company that was in the auto parts sector. Are you guys finding that there is a supply chain issue there, meaning that a lot of these places that supply parts that you need to fix your car are no longer manufacturing because they're shut down because they've got to socially distance?
There's no doubt about it. Every industry is different. In the hundreds of business people I've spoken to since I got home a couple of weeks ago, you're lucky if you're off 10 to 20%. Yeah. Many, and probably about a third, maybe a little more, fall into off 25 to 40%. That's where our companies would be. We have our own trucking company. Freight is actually holding its own, but ours is dedicated to the products we distribute. And yes, Detroit shut down. Dealerships are still selling some vehicles. It's a big ticket item, so that's slowed down. We'll look to find a new break-even point, and we're lucky that we had the strongest economy that I've ever witnessed, 37 years of being the CEO of them, and we'll get through it. But many are in that third category, off 50 to 100%. That is what you call demand and supply destruction, which if we don't start looking how we smartly turn back on the economy in places like Idaho, Wyoming, Alaska, Indiana, selectively adhering to all the things that health experts, we can do both things. Yeah. We carry this too far, government is going to be swamped and will not be the solution. It'll be beyond the point of no return.
Thank you, Senator Braun. I really appreciate you sharing your insight with us. It's really nice to hear how things are going in a state like Indiana versus all the metropolitan areas we hear so much about.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up, who's slamming the WHO?
We're bringing back our company to talk about the World Health Organization's role in mismanaging the coronavirus pandemic. That next.